king of the road.
Neon can look soft when it bounces off rhinestones, but in old Nashville, that glow covered contracts written in disappearing ink, grudges sealed with grins, and cornball jokes hiding calculators. People pointed at overalls, rubber chickens, bargain bin props, corny taglines, and swore these folks were harmless, while those same harmless folks slid their names onto radio towers, oil leases, publishing catalogs, tourist traps, and charity boards. Buck Owens grinned through hee-haw gags while stacking nicks quietly. Roy Clark juggled banjos on TV and symphonies off it. Grandpa Jones archived porch songs. Goober counted scholarships. Junior Samples sold phone numbers. Minnie Pearl burst on stage yelling, "Howdy!" with a price tag dangling like unfinished shopping, yet Sarah Cannon wielded a theater degree, Velvet Negotiations, and later stamped her name on a cancer center that still hums at midnight. Porter Wagoner's jackets looked like slot machines exploding, but behind that glitter he produced records, owned masters, and opened a gate for Dolly Parton while guarding ledger books. Ferlin Husky toggled to Simon Crumb, dodging labels and double-dipping checks. Little Jimmy Dickens stood pocket-sized yet mentored Opry rookies. Ray Stevens tracked every harmony, invoice, and royalty stream like a clown-faced CPA. Each quarter. Jim Nabors, forever Gomer to primetime America, crooned gentle country albums, banked television money into macadamia groves in Hawaii, and smiled while critics mistook the drawl for dimness. Boxcar Willie looked like a wandering rail ghost, yet bought Branson dirt early, built a theater, and mapped tourist traffic before travel bureaus noticed. Red Sovine whispered through CB radios to lonely truckers, syndicating heartache until quarters piled. Claude King sang Wolverton Mountain, reinvested in oil and acreage. Del Reeves giggled about diesel smoke but scouted, wrote, and collected finder's fees. Ernest Tubb drilled discipline into bands and storefronts. On Broadway nightly, Jerry Reed mugged, cracked wise, and played the clueless sidekick, while his right hand ripped guitar runs that made Chet Atkins grin, and his left hand seized publishing before ink dried. Roger Miller tossed off Dang Me like a dare, then waltzed to Broadway with Big River and stacked 11 Grammys like casino chips. Lester Flatt let Earl Scruggs shoot fireworks while he steered contracts, tucked the Beverly Hillbillies theme away, and smiled at luck. David Stringbean Aikman's Long John's masked frugality and fear of banks. Cash and walls felt safer until wolves read blueprints. Greed kicked doors. Silence shattered faith. Dolly Parton fluttered, sparkled, giggled, and let headlines treat her like a cartoon, then cashed checks from I Will Always Love You twice, built Dollywood where trees stood, raised resorts where gravel baked, and mailed millions of books through her imagination library like confetti made of paperbacks. She thanked Porter Wagoner sweetly, moved fences quietly, and never signed anything she couldn't own twice. The wig and wink were Kevlar wrapped in sequins. Philanthropy scaled like a #1 single. Interviews stayed sugar. Contracts stayed steel. Underestimate her and you're already paying interest. Respect arrives late, compounding overnight without apologies attached. Patterns drip through the hayseed paint like rain through a barn roof. Own the words, the notes, the towers. Diversify faster than remotes can click. Radio, oil, strip malls, trucking songs, theaters, peanuts, even a joke phone number. Turn a costume into a trademark, a catchphrase into a pipeline, an accent into fog. Smile kindly, slide addendums on page 3, initial margins while the room laughs. When they think you're broke, they stop counting your land. When they think you're lucky, they miss the midnight calls. Aw shucks became strategy. How D became sonar. Pride guarded vaults, laughter picked every lock. Jerry Reed didn't stumble into Smokey and the Bandit cash. He harvested it with fingers already inked on other people's hits. Roger Miller wasn't babbling. He was sneaking literature past censors of taste. Buck Owens sold nicks for a number that made stone-faced accountants gulp. Roy Clark goofed on camera, then toured Moscow concert halls, shaking ministers' hands, pocketing diplomatic fees. Grandpa Jones filed history while tossing corn pone. George Goober Lindsay hugged kids in hospitals and funneled sitcom money into scholarships. Junior Samples mangled words, sold jalopies, and still turned a nonsensical phone line into residuals. Clumsy sells ownership daily. Boxcar Willie's beard disguised a planner's calendar. He bought early, flipped cleverly, locked tourists before brochures knew directions. Red Sovine's tearful monologues rode asphalt at 3 a.m., syndicated across truck stops, proving niche can bankroll palaces. Claude King kept geologists on speed dial. Del Reeves, forever chuckling, scribbled futures for other throats. Ernest Tubb patrolled buses like barracks, disciplined, punctual, relentless, his Broadway shop shining like a lighthouse. Ferlin Husky toggled personas and taxation brackets. Ray Stevens signed checks to himself. Lester Flatt smiled, counting mail. Stringbean hid money, tragedy crashed through drywall, warning everyone silence isn't armor. Greed listens. Minnie Pearl's dangling tag wasn't forgetfulness, it was a logo. Porter Wagoner's mirrors flashed, but spreadsheets glowed hotter. Little Jimmy Dickens shook every newcomer's hand and whispered lessons about splits. Jim Neighbors planted macadamias, let sitcom reruns water them. George Goober Lindsay turned oh shucks into endowments. Junior Samples proved mispronunciation can become a brand asset. Buck Owens stitched Bakersfield sound to broadcast towers. Roy Clark toured continents like county fairs. Jerry Reed stamped copyrights before films rolled. Roger Miller charted nonsense like cartographers chart treasure. Dolly Parton mailed joy disguised as paper. That's not accident, it's choreography, calculated country theater. Patterns repeat: own, diversify, disguise, smile wide, hide clauses, speak slow, move fast, let them underestimate you, it's cheaper than security. When the banker chuckles, buy the block. When the critic yawns, register the trademark. When the host snickers, adjust the back-end points. Dumb was the costume department. Genius was accounts receivable. Ernest Tubbs' shop still glows. Dolly's books still arrive. Minnie Pearl's hospital still heals. Red Savine still whispers on late-night playlists. Boxcar Willie's theater still books nostalgia. Every giggle bought a brick. Every brick birthed a legacy. Chess, not checkers, played in denim. Contracts hum beneath laughter. Claude King didn't chase fame for applause. He chased leases, drilling rights, percentages that never tour but always pay. Del Reeves kept novelty singles chugging while he scouted the next star like a recruiter hiding under a trucker cap. Ray Stevens bought the studio, then charged himself fair rates, capturing margin nobody else could touch. Lester Flatt's voice sounded neighborly, his handshake locked like a vault. Jerry Reed licensed riffs down to television cues. Roger Miller wrote a river musical and let other people sing the water. Buck Owens franchised himself. Roy Clark globalized goofiness. Grandpa archived banjos, quietly profiting. George Goober Lindsay wasn't clueless. He was strategic charity with a drawl. He turned autograph lines into scholarship funds and sitcom checks into college dorm lights. Junior Samples mangled enunciation, but the gag line became intellectual property. Jim Neighbors took Shazam to the bank, then harvested nuts while neighbors laughed. Minnie Pearl softened crowds, hardened contracts. Porter Wagoner smiled for camera flashes and sharpened pencils backstage. Ferlin Husky floated between selves like a tax wizard. Little Jimmy Dickens proved tiny bodies can cast giant shadows. Ernest Tubb taught punctuality with a boot heel. Stringbean's tragedy taught everyone security matters daily. Boxcar Willie scooped up theaters like bottle caps, each one worth more than applause. Red Sovine licensed his sob stories to every late-night radio syndicator hungry for filler and tears. Claude King used royalties as seed money for rigs, not Cadillacs. Del Reeves was the guy smiling so you wouldn't notice him counting. Ray Stevens, behind the pranks, perfected overdubs and ownership. Lester Flatt let other folks chase solos. He chased statements. Jerry Reed cracked jokes about being broke while routing income through catalogs. Roger Miller drank coffee, wrote hooks, and called lawyers before lunch. Buck Owens reread every clause. Roy Clark packed luggage with tuxes and overalls, ready for symphonies or state fairs, cashing both without blinking. Grandpa Jones remembered church step ballads the industry forgot, then monetized nostalgia. George Goober Lindsay painted stupidity so thick nobody saw the grant applications beneath. Junior Samples turned stumbles into slogans. Jim Neighbors moved from Mayberry to agribusiness effortlessly. Minnie Pearl stitched philanthropy into every stitch of gingham. Porter Wagoner balanced ego and ledger. Ferlin Husky manipulated personas like a magician. Little Jimmy Dickens leaned on charm, cashed wisdom. Ernest Tubb kept time like rents due. Stringbean hid secrets in studs, greed circling. Dolly Parton's smile distracted cameras while signatures locked equity. She speaks kindly, counts fiercely, remembers every decimal. She built Dollywood, yes, but also health programs, housing funds, research grants, and book drops reaching towns forgotten by maps. She learned from Porter, outgrew Porter, paid Porter, thanked Porter. She learned from everyone, then scaled bigger. She packages humility because humility sells, but she inventories assets like any Wall Street shark. Her hair is distraction, her pen is blade. Glitter isn't vanity, it's bait. Meanwhile, compound interest sits quietly backstage, humming harmony while the crowd chants lyrics. Contracts echo past curtain calls, patterns again, disguise, decide, diversify. Ernest Tubbs' shop anchors Broadway like a bank disguised as a jukebox. Buck Owens' branding still streams online. Ray Stevens' studio hosts newbies who pay the prank king rent. Lester Flatt's royalties feed estates. Jerry Reed's riffs soundtrack car ads. Roger Miller's river keeps flowing in theaters. Roy Clark's archives pay licensing fees. Grandpa Jones's collection funds documentaries. Ferlin Husky's alter ego textbook students. Minnie Pearl's hospital research saves strangers. Porter Wagoner's catalog still spins. Little Jimmy Dickens' lessons echo backstage. Stringbean's warning whispers in safes. Goober's scholarships graduate nurses yearly. Red Sovine comforts highways. Claude King's drilling bets outlived chart positions. Del Reeves's scouting credits hide on liner notes nobody reads until royalty disputes surface. Boxcar Willie's theater blueprint became Branson's template. Red Sovine's tearjerkers still sell anthologies to night shift diners. Jim Neighbors' nut farm remains profitable tourist candy. Junior Samples' bumbling remains merch. Minnie Pearl's likeness licenses politely. Porter Wagoner's suits tour museums. Ferlin Husky's Simon Crumb alter ego still streams. Little Jimmy Dickens' jackets inspire Halloween costumes. Ernest Tubbs' boot heel marks the timeline. Stringbean's cabin stands like a lesson. Dolly Parton's library ships daily. Roy Clark's grin cashes foreign checks eternally. Jerry Reed hustled like a riverboat dealer, licensing licks, acting, touring, collecting. Roger Miller played court jester and court clerk. Buck Owens syndicated Bakersfield swagger. Roy Clark weaponized charm. Grandpa Jones saved fiddle lines like lifeboats. George Goober Lindsay leveraged naivete. Jim Neighbors diversified crops and catalogs. Junior Samples turned bumbling into brand equity. Minnie Pearl transformed cornpone into oncology wings. Porter Wagoner juggled ego and enterprise. Ferlin Husky balanced personas. Little Jimmy Dickens negotiated like a giant. Ray Stevens automated royalties. Lester Flatt stayed quiet but counted. Stringbean's cash stash warned successors. Ernest Tubb drilled punctuality. Claude hedged everything. Del Reeves whispered across corridors, tipping producers toward green kids he'd already signed percentages on. Boxcar Willie booked matinees and mornings, selling pie with tickets. Red Sovine voiced empathy that could be monetized without shame. Claude King's accountant smiled a lot. Porter Wagoner aired heartbreak while tallying back-end points. Minnie Pearl raised spirits and endowments. Ray Stevens answered phones at his own studio. Jerry Reed showed up early to sign splits. Buck Owens turned Bakersfield into brand equity. Roy Clark kept instruments tuned and attorneys on call. Dolly Parton kept promises and patents. Goober funded nurses, Stringbean warned softly. Always. Ernest Tubbs' rulebook said show up, tune up, pay up, shut up, then cash up. Little Jimmy Dickens turned mentorship into a pension plan. Ferlin Husky let personas argue while royalties agreed. Jim Neighbors sold sincerity without discounting intellect. Junior Samples licensed laughter. George Goober Lindsay used simplicity to unlock donors. Ray Stevens automated checks in a pre-digital age. Lester Flatt made the mailbox sing. Jerry Reed outgrinned accountants. Roger Miller outwordplayed publishers. Buck Owens outbroadcast competitors. Roy Clark outpicked everyone. Minnie Pearl outlived doubt with medicine. Porter Wagoner outmaneuvered trends. Dolly Parton out-everythinged everybody. Boxcar built maps for tomorrow. Red Savine's voice sat beside coffee pots from Maine to Monterey. Proof empathy licenses well. Claude King's land kept pumping after DJs stopped spinning him. Del Reeves's comedy money financed serious songs by others. Boxcar Willie's hobo act wrote hotel invoices. String Bean's fate turned whispers into safes and cameras. Ernest Tubbs' neon script still sells t-shirts. Minnie Pearl's tag inspires logos. Porter Wagoner's pompadour anchors museum mannequins. Ferlin Husky's duality teaches branding. Buck Owens' red, white, blue guitar still advertises. Roy Clark's grin sells reruns. Jerry Reed's swagger sells car chases. Roger Miller's wit sells musicals. Goober Fund's future nurses. Jim Neighbors' fans bought syrupy ballads. His trees bought themselves. Junior Samples' garbled digits became advertising gold. Little Jimmy Dickens knew novelty ages. Mentorship doesn't. Ray Stevens built a studio playground and charged admission. Lester Flatt stayed off magazine covers and on checks. Dolly Parton tied ribbon bows around Empire paperwork. Porter Wagoner tracked airplay like weather. Minnie Pearl kept receipts with jokes. Ferlin Husky filed personas like patents. Ernest Tubb drilled tours into calendars. Buck Owens signed station logs. Roy Clark rehearsed jokes like etudes. Jerry Reed measured riffs by residuals. Roger Miller patented whimsy. Boxcar monetized every whistle. Grandpa Jones taped family hymns before lawyers knew royalties lived in attics. George Goober Lindsay took lowbrow scripts, highbrow meetings. Claude King invited bankers fishing. Del Reeves booked fares plus percentages of funnel cake stands. Red Sovine licensed Tears internationally. Boxcar Willie sold bus tours to nostalgia pilgrims. Ernest Tubb sold strings, picks, memories. Minnie Pearl sold hope. Porter Wagoner sold discovery. Ferlin Husky sold personas. Little Jimmy Dickens sold mischief. Ray Stevens sold surprise. Lester Flatt sold steadiness. Jerry Reed sold swagger. Roger Miller sold sass. Buck Owens sold infrastructure. Roy Clark sold possibility. Dolly sold forever, String Bean cautioned. String Bean's murder turned ammunition for gossip into a financial literacy seminar nobody forgot. Hide money, sure, but also lock doors, trust banks, hire guards, insure catalogs. After that night, safes multiplied across Music Row. Ernest Tubbs set curfews. Minnie Pearl hired auditors. Porter Wagoner cataloged wardrobes. Dolly Parton upgraded fences and foundations. Ray Stevens installed systems. Lester Flatt revisited wills. Jerry Reed diversified beyond publishing. Roger Miller rechecked clauses. Buck Owens tightened boardrooms. Roy Clark formalized touring. George Goober Lindsay tightened charity oversight. Junior Samples registered slogans. Jim Neighbors notarized acres. Ferlin Husky documented Simon. Claude King double-checked deeds daily. Dolly Parton didn't just rewrite her story, she rewrote what philanthropy looks like in denim and sequins. She made reading cool rural clinics normal and financial power glamorous without apology. She thanks the audience, sure, yet bills the industry properly. Her blueprint: let them call you sugar while you sign steel. She, like the others, wore armor made of jokes. The hair, diversion. The heart, real. The calculator, ruthless. Nobody forced these legends to learn chess. Nashville's contract sharks did. They survived by smiling, adapting, investing, and pretending the whole time they barely knew multiplication. Meanwhile, interest sang back up daily. So laugh, but check the deed. Clap. but clock the back end. Quote the catchphrase, but ask who owns it. Those overalls hid LLCs. That cornpone routine shielded cap tables. The price tag was a registered mark. The jalopy lot was a syndication studio. The CB tearjerker was a subscription funnel. The hobo beard covered a land rush. The butterfly giggle fluttered over a fortress. Every stereotype was currency, every wink an escrow receipt. They let you enjoy the show while they balanced the books. And when the lights dimmed, checks still arrived, polite as Sunday ushers. Chess wins quietly nightly. Call it country cunning, hillbilly hedge funds, porch swing equity. Jerry Reed called it fun. Roger Miller called it rhyme. Buck Owens called it business. Roy Clark called it practice. Grandpa Jones called it saving songs. George Goober Lindsay called it helping kids. Junior Samples called it a laugh. Jim Neighbors called it farming. Minnie Pearl called it service. Porter Wagoner called it production. Ferlin Husky called it characters. Little Jimmy Dickens called it staying small, thinking big. Ray Stevens called it ownership. Lester Flatt called it steady. Stringbean called it caution. Ernest Tubb called it rules. Dolly called it love. So next time you hear a hayseed hook or see a rhinestone hat, ask what's hiding under the brim. Maybe it's a deed, a patent, a payroll, a grant, a script, a syllabus. Maybe it's a child's book arriving free. Maybe it's chemo humming because a clown said howdy. Maybe it's highways soothed by a baritone. Maybe it's Branson lit by a hobo's dream. Maybe it's a mandolin-sized mentor shaping giants. Maybe it's Dolly counting softly while laughing loudly. Either way, the joke was never on them. It was a neon arrow pointing at opportunity, and they took it gladly.